Welcome to today's discussion titled Openness is Changing the Future of Payments. My name is Mélisande Moual and I'm the Managing Director of The Papers, the leading global source of news and analysis for payments and e-commerce. We are co-hosting this event with Payon and First Annapolis Consulting. Some quick questions on the housekeeping. We have a Q&A at the end of the webinar, but you can anonymously ask questions at any time throughout the presentation by typing questions to one of the panelists. During the presentation, we will compile questions and I will ask them at the end of the webinar. This webinar is based upon a white paper written jointly by Payon and First Annapolis Consulting. Both companies watch the payment industry very closely to identify trends and opportunities. With this white paper and webinar, Payon and First Annapolis will firstly describe what they mean by openness, discuss what that means for the market, and give practical guidance about what you can do to become more open. The first speaker is Jip de Lange, a senior consultant at First Annapolis Consulting. Jip is an expert in the payments industry, having worked at InnoPay, a technology advisory firm, before joining First Annapolis. He will focus on the theoretical ideas of openness and defining the term and explaining why it is important for the payment industry. Jip, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mélisande. My name is Jip de Lange and I'm a strategy consultant with First Annapolis, as Mélisande mentioned. First Annapolis has worked with Payon in drafting this white paper. We are an advisory firm that focuses exclusively on payments, and therefore we get to see a lot of payment companies from the inside. And it has been during those projects that we witnessed trends towards more plug-and-play-like technology, more partnership-oriented business models, and a more bottom-up approach to trust in the industry. And at first, these developments appeared isolated, but later we began to see that they are part of a broader trend. In working with Payon on this white paper, we began to call the combination of these trends open payments. So during the next 15 minutes or so, I will be talking about what we mean with this concept, how we think it came to be, and what it might mean to you. I will try to keep it brief because after me, Wolfgang Werner of Payon will give his perspective and will also illustrate how Payon is addressing the trend. If you might have questions, please use the tools in your screen, as Mélisande explained. So we've written this white paper about open payments, and this. So the first part, I will be talking about what we mean exactly by this concept of open payments. And to explain this, I would like to introduce the following framework. When we look at payments, we see three dimensions: technology, business, and trust. And when we look at open services, as we call them, we see three characteristics: accessibility, flexibility, and transparency. So if we combine the two, we get this matrix, and this is also how the paper is built up. So here's the dimension of payment service as we see them, and here is the characteristics or attributes of open services. And we will walk through the metrics, not going line by line, but walk through the metrics and highlight some examples. First of all, we'll turn to technology. Internet technology is enabling an increasingly free flow of data, and therefore it makes services more accessible in terms of time and place. Access is provided through APIs, and even though security of data is extremely important in the financial services industry, we see more and more players experimenting with it. These might be card schemes like MasterCard and Visa, but another example is BBVA, a bank that is making anonymized payment data available to the developer community. It's very interesting experiment. Flexibility is seen, for instance, in services becoming more and more componentized. So users can pick and choose and combine these services to address specific business needs. An example here is fraud solution threat metrics. They offer a package of services, and some users will choose to source their full anti-fraud kit, but other users choose to turn to threat metrics for specific data points and use those data points to make their own fraud decisions. And this is the kind of flexibility that comes from componentized services. And when talking about transparency in technology, we, for instance, refer to open source code, but also engaging with the developer community. Being out there is an important part of this. And Wolfgang will mention this later in his part of the presentation. In business, openness is all about partnerships. Business models associated with payment services are becoming more accessible and more flexible. And what we mean here, for instance, with accessible is that payment services are becoming less exclusive and less difficult, so to say. Easy sign-up, for instance, is a key differentiator for payment service providers. And services are less and less limited by the location or the nature of those who use them or who provide them. An important and powerful example here is Square. Square, its most visible innovation was the card reader. Everybody knows the card reader that can be mounted on top of a smartphone. But maybe a more important innovation and key to their success was a tiered approach to merchant accreditation. So Square introduced a lighter accreditation regime for the smallest merchants and thereby making card payments accessible for micro merchants. More flexible business models are exemplified by an infinite diversity of business arrangement and collaborations between companies. Different brands, different market approaches, and I already mentioned the componentized, the unbundled service propositions, sometimes offered on a white label basis, sometimes delivered through distribution partners, sometimes combined in a one-stop shop to merchants. An example here is, for instance, how e-commerce payments are wrapped in a broader proposition by Shopify. Merchants buy a shop in a box, so to say, and payments are an integrated part of that. The PSP is almost invisible. And when we turn to the third dimension of payment services, we are talking about trust. And trust may be a bit conceptual and a bit more difficult to explain, but it is trust that makes payment services the special business that we are all in. We are actually working in a highly specialized industry that's very sensitive to fraud, because what we're doing is essentially moving money. And traditionally, providing these payment services was restricted to heavily regulated institutions. And there were good reasons for that. And innovation in this area has made it possible to better tailor accreditation for different risk profiles and in a more tiered approach. I already mentioned how Square disrupted here merchant acceptance. Transparency in this respect refers, for instance, to communities as a basis of trust instead of accreditation. On the internet, this is used more often, but in payments, we are only just beginning to see how what this can mean. And I would like to use WePay as an example here. They use social data to learn all kinds of things about their clients and to make risk profiles of those clients. And with these risk profiles, they can provide cost-effective services to user segments that were previously unserved. And they do this based on those social data points, and they use it to sort of do additional accreditation and make risk decisions. Well, all of this might sound a bit abstract and conceptual, And therefore, I would like to encourage you all to download the white paper, because here we illustrate all these statements with marketplace examples. Now, I will spend a couple of minutes on how this trend came to be. We see three stages, and first, payment services, as I mentioned, were provided by regulated institutions, respected and traditional institutions that provided one-size-fits-all propositions. They were the trusted party between trading entities. Moving from there to the current stage, so to say, where we see partnerships and alliances, because there's more complicated and more sophisticated business needs that can only be answered by service providers working together in arranged partnerships. And therefore, we came at this more complex value chain. And looking to the future, in the final stage, although it's a bit of a hyped term, but we use the term ecosystem, because partnerships are forged on a more ad hoc basis. So providers put their services out there, and it's for anyone to use. So standard terms, standard file formats and interfaces, and self-services and peer-to-peer support models all fit in this end stage. And where we are heading, this ecosystem stage, is nicely illustrated by, for instance, open source commerce platforms like Magento and OS Commerce. These are communities of independent developers building parts and components, and all these components, they work together seamlessly because they were designed according to a common set of standards, but without central steering or a blueprint. And this paradigm brings unmatched creativity and flexibility to meet specific business needs. And now the question is, of course, why does this all matter? Well, there's three main reasons. First of all, payments are becoming integrated, and I will explain a bit about this in a minute. Secondly, open payment services are creating value for end users and their service providers involved. And end users are eventually benefiting. Well, first of all, as previously mentioned, payments are becoming less of an independent service. They are being integrated into a broader set of commerce solutions, and they are sometimes even made invisible. Card vaults are the most widespread example of this, and anyone that recently used a Uber taxi cab will agree that this is a pretty compelling payment experience, but it can only be created if you collaborate. Another reason is globalization. Globalization makes partnerships inevitable because there's no global solution in payments out there. So the only way to provide a decent global solution is by entering into partnerships. The same goes for online channel commerce. Partnerships between the best in the different channels is, at this point, the only way to create a compelling omni-channel payment experience. Well then, how open payments are creating value. First of all, there's a faster time to market. We saw numerous companies that developed into global players in a matter of years recently, and this is because of their open models and the way they approach partnerships. The other way to create value is by enhanced usability, which ultimately leads to incremental sales. And thirdly, the flexibility in business models is a way to create value. It makes you more adaptable to market conditions and changes of those market conditions. Ultimately, we can say openness in payments benefits most stakeholders and especially end users. Through better service, more choice, more seamless integration, higher conversion, which leads to incremental business, and ultimately lower cost. And now there's an important role here for the gateway to unlock the possibilities of these open payment services, because there's so much components, so much specific solutions out there that facilitating this complexity for merchant becomes a job in itself. And that's where gateways step in to make things less difficult, so more compelling for merchants, and unlock the potential of all these open services. In the paper that we, together with Peon, drafted, we explain this a bit further. And we give some hints on how to embrace this concept for your business. I'm also sure that Wolfgang Berner, Peon's Senior Vice President on Product, can tell more about it. And he'll do so in a minute. So therefore, I encourage you all to download the paper that will be distributed directly after this webinar. And if you have any questions, direct them through the panel on your screen.
Okay, Jip, very much. Thank you for kicking off the discussion. Now that we have had a framework for what open payments are and why they are important, I will turn things over to Wolfgang Berner. He is the Senior Vice President of Product at Peon. Wolfgang has been with Peon since it was founded. That was over 10 years ago, and he has been instrumental in moving Peon towards openness. Wolfgang will speak about what openness means in practice for actors in the industry. Wolfgang, please kick off. You can begin.
Thank you, Melisande. As Melisande said, I'm Wolfgang Berner. I'm responsible for product management and product strategy at Peon, and want to share some insights on how we implemented the openness into our product. And actually, we created a product that we call Open Payment Platform that carries that openness vision into our product suite. Here is the dimensions that Jip was sketching out and the attributes that define openness as within the paper, and I want to run you through those on how we implemented on those aspects. So first of all, you want to have accessible service in technology. What does that mean? They need to be accessible for all stakeholders in the ecosystem. Obviously available anytime, anywhere, for a do-it-yourself basis. And how have we done that at Peon? We've created one single API for all platform features. Now, what does that mean? To be more precise here, it means one single API to all platform features that includes everything that you need in regards to payments. You want to provide choices there, forms, SDKs, server integrations, but it doesn't stop at payment itself. You also want to have APIs for reporting, for administrating the platform, and also opening the merchant portal, the dashboard, to other applications to have everything under one login for clients. You want to have flexibility in technology. It's about providing services individually and of course they can be combined. Those services then that you can build on top of that, they can be both built in-house. So we build our own new products on top of that. We can build it through third parties, but also partners can choose components, services that we provide to suit the business model and their needs and create appropriate services on top of that. And in the end, the result is a modular services provided through a flexible API, and as a side benefit, what you essentially get with that is also a future-proof architecture. Because if you're having services that are very fine-grained and very modular, you end up with a very robust and future-proof architecture. Then let me give you an example of what we are already doing in that regard. So that is one example where we integrated our merchant portal with an acquirer portal, and in the end, the merchant doesn't really want to know where all his information is coming from. He needs it in one place. He needs it under one single login, and it needs to be combined in one dashboard. So in this case, what we did, we have an acquiring dashboard and some widgets integrated into the dashboard, and that's something we've implemented in a couple of scenarios with our clients. And it's a seamless experience for the merchant. He doesn't know, and he actually doesn't need to care where the information is coming from. And actually, in fact, it's different systems with different purposes, but aggregate into one thing for the merchant. Then it's about transparency in technology. So the key thing to openness, it needs to be, as Yip sketched out, it needs to be publicly available. You need to have publicly available resources. You need to have interactivity, and we'll show you in a sec a quick live demo on what I mean with interactivity and where the power in this one lies. And our implementation of that, the result of that on our end, is like providing an online, interactive, and white label documentation guide and developer portal. Now, what we are doing from a business model perspective, we are providing our services white label, and by following that openness approach and now providing that white label to more than 100 clients, we actually act as a multiplier in openness. And what we do here and what you see here is the developer portal, and the developer portal is something that we tailor to the needs of our clients. So they can make their choices. What kind of payment methods do they want? What kind of options do they want to provide? What kind of default currencies, and so on. And all of that is there to be easily embedded into the website of the PSP of our client. So they are having on the website, they typically have a link, API docs or documentation, and that's where this gets integrated to. Let me show you a quick example of the customization here. This is sample scenario targeting Central European SME merchants. As you can see, okay, you have a stripped down number on payment methods because that's what he chose to provide to the SME merchants. We have a reduced number of options on the left-hand side that you want to provide to the client, completely tailored to the needs of the client here. Now let me show you that in practice. So this is now our developer portal, as you've seen the screenshots before. So what you want to have is you want to provide choices. So that's where someone who wants to integrate lands. So you want to provide choices. You want to pick him up to his needs. And then you directly want to give him instant access to the system. And what I mean with that is, so you provide him a step-by-step tutorial to have quick success, guide him through an integration, and also let him interact with the system. What do I mean with that? So on the one hand, obviously, again, providing choices. So everybody uses his own programming language for whatever reason, so you want to provide code samples. That's a given. There's playgrounds where you can just edit requests. But you also want to directly interact with the system. Now, that's why we integrated all the tried out buttons. And what it does now is actually sending those requests that you see there to the system and directly get a feedback from the system. Then again, this is a 3-step tutorial of our payment forms. So I can run through all the steps of the integration here and actually execute a transaction. And then in the third step, I get so as said, it's a 3-step process. I query the result of the transaction, get immediate response. That's exactly our system's response to the request. Quickly can show it also in the system. So, okay, there's somebody sending a lot of transactions right now. Okay, I would have seen my transaction here, but obviously there's a lot of somebody's testing right now. So I have a ton of transactions here. But the important thing is here, you want to play directly with the system and not have like a theoretical thing going on here. Then it's about completeness as well. So step-by-step tutorial is one thing that gives you quick success, that solves like an immediate integration need, but then you need the full details. You need something like a reference that gives you then field by field what can you send where, you need the formats and all that kind of stuff. And you also want to have things like a support section, FAQs. So you want to have that as a complete thing for the merchant or for the guy who wants to integrate to really make it self-service for him. So, in summary, what are the key elements of openness and technology to create a great integration experience? So on the one hand, as I said, instant access and completeness. So it's you need step-by-step tutorials. You want to have tried out buttons. You want to have the documentation interactive, that you really interact with the system that you're integrating with. And you want to have responsive tutorial designs as well, in a sense that, because you have people out there who are window shopping by looking at various players, and even if they will not integrate on the mobile, they surely will look at it on the mobile. So you better have your developer portal in a responsive design. You want to provide choice. As I said, you want to have the integration options, you want to have code samples in different programming languages, you want to have SDKs, you want to have plugins. And finally, it's about great support. It's about actively engaging with the people, be responsive, be present at events, talk to the people. You need to see the people doing the integration, because if you will not do that, the greatest concept in theory will only will only prove itself when you use it to real people. So you need to see people interacting with your documentation. You need to see them interacting with your system, and then you know if you did a good job in presenting those APIs. Finally, what's the benefits for us, for the clients in that regard? So it's about saving money. First of all, for the merchant, it's simplest self-service integration. Obviously, this is time to market. The faster he integrates, the faster he earns money with it. For our clients, for our PSPs, it's dramatically reducing support costs. And as a benefit, if we manage to reduce their support costs, it will also, of course, reduce our support costs. It's about making money, fast integration to start selling faster. And from the PSP side, they obviously, if they board more merchants at the same time, they will also make more money, because by having that self-service, the merchant needs to, the PSP needs to interact with the merchants a lot less, so you can do a lot more at the same time. And then the great thing about Openness on the partnership and innovation level, it's about differentiation and creating value-added services on top of that. So you can do that yourself. As I said, it's also something we ourselves benefit from, because we can create our own products out of it, but our clients can do the same. And we can also have third parties coming in here and create applications and services in the ecosystem and also sell it in the ecosystem. So somebody who is not even in payments, who is like a development company, they create an app and we can sell it into the ecosystem, because it's based on the same platform. Finally, one final comment to this trend. So we have certainly not invented Openness. This is a general trend, as Yip said, and it's really time for payment providers to move in that direction now. The time is really now. And I also want to highly encourage you to look at the white paper, download the white paper. And with that, I want to thank everybody and hand back to Melisande for final questions.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Wolfgang, for the insightful description on how Payon is becoming more open. We hope this webinar showed you how openness is changing the payment industry, and we believe that both legacy providers and new and upcoming providers can benefit. Becoming open is not simple and will require sustained effort across an organization. Yet it will be worth it, because the industry is changing, as Yip and Wolfgang explained and showcased, and so the actors must change as well. We did not receive any questions so far, but there is still time to ask your questions, and I would really encourage you to do that. We received one question about the link to download the paper. We will send it to you shortly after the webinar. But let me first ask a first question to Yip. And meanwhile, please send in your question. We'd really appreciate that. Yip, you mentioned that openness is also about inclusiveness, that more players now have access to certain services. Can you explain what has changed? Why wasn't this the case before?
Well, it is more about I try to explain it a bit with the example of Square. So certain merchant segments or or segments of businesses that previously were too small to accept, for instance, card payments, or would not make the criteria for accreditation, now actually can, because there's intermediaries that make it more easy to join, so to say. So it's worthwhile to onboard these merchants when it is less difficult, so to say. So that is how it's becoming more inclusive.
Okay, many thanks, Jip. I'm happy that I just received a question. The question is, in looking at different payment systems, where you're looking at companies in specific countries, if so, can you talk about which ones? Can you talk about the differences that you found between the US payment system versus the European payment systems in terms of how open and integrated the payment systems are? Wolfgang, is that a question that you would like to answer?
I can try. So to me there is a bit of a difference. I think in the US you have a broader spectrum here. So on the one hand, you have companies. You mentioned a couple of them, like Square and the likes, and they are front runners of this trend. But on the other hand, of course, yeah, payments being around, particularly in the US for such a long time, you also have a very, very big stack of legacy around. And in Europe, the spread is not that big. But in general, I think the adoption of openness in the US is bigger than in Europe.
Okay, thanks for your clear answer in this case, Wolfgang. I have another question coming in, which regards the integration. Wolfgang, can you elaborate a bit more on on basically how long does it take to integrate the open payment system of Payon? What are the timelines that we need to take into account?
Yeah, so that one very much depends on merchant setup. But just to give you some data points here, so we recently did a small hackathon at a tech conference, and what I did there is I did a 45 minutes talk, and it was bring your notebooks with an iPad kind of thing, and the crowd really was tech people. And we tested it beforehand, no relevant payment experience. So there was one guy who had some far memories of payments, but that was it. So it was obviously skilled developers, but certainly not payment guys. And the fastest integration was 14 minutes, and that was a full end-to-end integration. So I showed you this 3-step tutorial, and that was a complete integration. Including the server part, so all 3 steps incorporated in that integration. And I think we had 35 people participating, and I think 80% of them finished it in those 45 minutes, and that was really despite me talking, where I was a bit afraid. I thought maybe I may be disturbing the guys there, but it did work out, and yeah, as I said, 14 minutes.
Okay, well, impressive, I would say. It's really good to see we have great attendees today. Questions are popping in. We might not have enough time to address all questions. I really would like to emphasize that if we can't reply, we get back to your question now, we will do after the webinar. The Payon team will contact you and discuss further. But let me go to the next question. That's for you, Wolfgang. Again, the question is there a built-in foreign exchange conversion for reporting on multi-currency transactions? And is there a facility for foreign exchange actual risk being taken by third parties?
So the answer to this is no right now. So foreign exchange conversion is something that is done by our clients. And this is, by the way, also a great example of this openness, because what we are seeing here is what clients are doing is they are incorporating our reporting with their FX reporting, which is not functionality of our system, to create a seamless experience for the merchant.
Okay, clear. There is another question, of course. We have questions regarding fraud. Question is, how do you balance openness with the needs of security? Is greater openness, could that compromise a provider's security? So how do you handle this fraud? And how do you detect fraud?
Yeah, so there is, so in terms of security, there is a lot of, it's getting lesser now, but a lot of people have a perceived sense of security by hiding information or by hiding APIs and protecting them by handing them out only if you fill in a 20-page NDA and stuff like that. But that doesn't really help in terms of security. Now, security is a and fraud prevention and that kind of stuff. That's a global thing now. And somebody who wants to do harm will do harm and will also get access to your API, because ultimately you need to provide it, even if you let people sign 10 NDAs. So there will be a lot of people having it anyway, and those guys who want to do harm will get it. And if you open your services to the community by making everything public, you also have more eyes on your security model. So the community is also there and will tell you if your security model doesn't work. And I think there's a couple of examples out there that show that. So all the cryptography algorithms and stuff like that, that is done open source, and that's the only way you can get a rock solid. You can get rock solid security. And in regards to the other questions that you raised, in regards to fraud prevention, so in terms of detecting fraud on payments, what we do at the Payon side is, on the one hand, we have an integrated risk engine that is built on top of a lot of checks that we built by ourselves. So the classic is things like velocity checks, IP geolocation, all the kind of things. And on top of that, what we also do is we've integrated the best of the industry fraud prevention providers. On the one hand, sometimes this is global solutions, somebody like ThreatMetrics, like Yip mentioned before, but sometimes it's also like local fraud prevention, local risk databases. For example, Schufa in Germany, which gives you credit scores about people, and yeah, that's how we do fraud prevention.
Okay, so both global partners that cover global fraud prevention and detection, and local for markets you work with. Okay, I guess I have a question. Thanks, Wolfgang. I have a question for Yip. It regards the future of openness. The question is, what does this mean for banks? Does it mean that banks are going to have to expand their activities and offer non-financial services? Or so basically, what is the impact on this future openness model on banks, and maybe broader on the industry as such?
Yeah, okay. I will try to address that without talking for 30 minutes. But I don't see it as banks having to move out of financial services. I think a key part of this is offering componentized services that seamlessly work together with other lines of business. So it actually provides the opportunity to focus on what you do best, but having your service integrated in a broader proposition, or having it combined by someone else into his combination, or offering certain parts of your service to certain parts of the community, etc. So I think it's more a matter of combining services than having to do everything.
Okay. I think I've got almost, because we are almost in the final. We have to finalize because of the timing of the webinar. So I see one question popping up. It's about the customization of the portal. In what way, this is a question for Wolfgang, in what way is it possible to customize, with logos and the likes, the portal that you provide to your customers?
Yeah. So there's a variety of ways we can customize the portal there. So obviously, certainly logos you can change. You can change the payment methods. You can change the structure of the documentation, in a sense that you can pick and choose of all the options that we have, and we can also help you making those choices. You can set default currencies, for example, almost. So the entire menu structure on the left hand side you saw in the tutorial, the top end menu, you can customize. You can customize how you want to call those interfaces. So obviously we have coined that term copy and pay that you've seen there, but you can give it your own name, and we see it frequently with our clients. So there's a ton of possibilities of customizing, and logo just being the simplest one.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for replying to this final question. I thank you very much for your time. As I mentioned, we will send you the link to the white paper shortly after the webinar. I highly encourage you to read it. There's a lot of great examples of openness, and even more in-depth insights into what this means for you and for the payment industry. Again, thanks for your attention. The questions that have not been asked in this webinar will be done afterwards. So the crew, the team from Payon will get back to you and contact you for further discussions. Once again, thank you very much for your time. And thank you, Jip and Wolfgang, for the great insights.